All right, let's get into this bad boy. Let's have a good time. Kriega Bundle. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Welcome to the library. I'm coming to you from here today because what I wanted to do is talk through a rather short Conan story. But it's a short Conan story that actually is rather long in its implications. And it's a weird one. And honestly, it's not really Robert E. Howard content. It's specific to the comics. And it's not even just specific to Marvel Comics. It's specific to Marvel Comics and then this odd duck of a character that came out of Malibu. And that's Rune. And you really think to yourself, okay, well, what was Marvel doing here? And this can't be that big of a thing, but there are actually some fairly serious implications to this one, at least as far as Marvel mythos goes. So what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through this one. I'm going to chapterize this video, by the way, for those of you who just want to click on through, because we're going to be talking through each individual book. Then we're going to talk about, well, what do I think happened here? Because really the way this came out was strange. Then at the end of this, we're going to do the old Tennessee Fats wrap-up where I say, well, did I enjoy this? Would you enjoy this? Should you own this? Well, no, there is an interesting question. But I think we should start this one off with actually a very general wrap-up of what exactly is a rune. All right, so let's start with the really important hanging question here, which is, what is a rune? Well, rune as a word means a lot of things, and I'm not here to really go into all sorts of iconography and what these things actually are and how they communicate. They were a written system of communicating the actual spoken word. That's all you need to know. But that's not what we're getting into here. We're getting into the actual character of Rune here. Now, Rune is kind of like this dark horse. And I don't mean dark horse as in the actual publishing company. I mean an actual dark horse. He's this massive outlier of a character that was created by Barry Windsor Smith that actually made his first appearance in this giant crossover event way back when Malibu Comics first hit the scene. And it's funny because the character actually makes his first appearance in a rather obscure title. I actually have a copy of it right here. Sludge. Yeah, this thing, Sludge, which is an ooze monster. Well, is he really an ooze? Okay, I'm going off topic. The flip books to all of the things that came out in this particular month were the origin or intro story of Barry Windsor Smith's Rune. Now, it was interesting because you actually had a lot of those images that were on the backs of these that came together to make a giant collage, a giant print, which was really cool when you put it all together and lay it out on the floor because it was pretty darn big. And here's what the actual back of this one looks like. I'll put it up over here for you guys so you can see it. And that, by the way, what you're seeing there is Rune's giant vampiric-like mouth. As he's, yeah, listen, you can go look up that image by yourself, okay? Barry Windsor Smith created this character who was kind of like a elder god. He almost pulled in sort of a Lovecraftian twist to this because Rune is described as an alien in many cases. He's also described as somebody who is aware of and can jump dimensions. And that comes a little bit more in the character's development as he's aware of extra dimensional time and space. And he's aware of these other dimensions and that people are there. But what he is he's a sorcerer as well. And he's a consumer. And he's not just a consumer in that he's like a vampire and he's drinking your blood. Like you can get that from the image of his teeth. Let's look at those teeth again. They're right over here. Like you can clearly sense this guy's a vampire and that's not a good thing. He's not going to get along well with humanity. But he's got these soul shards that he hangs around his neck, and there's something else altogether. Now, there was a lot of work that was done when Marvel bought Malibu, and I'm saying it in that way. You can choose to look it up yourself, and everybody sort of has a different take on what happened there. But in my mind, Marvel bought Malibu, brought it in, and then brought the characters in, but brought them in such a way that they were very briefly brought into the Marvel Universe, and then were summarily spun off and ended. So some really cool characters that existed in Malibu at the time ceased to get comic space. So some of the ones that were kind of cool were, well, there was the Exiles, that was kind of neat. You had the Strangers that were kind of cool. Sludge as an ooze monster. Rune being one of the top ones. And Rune, I think, was recognized by Marvel as being one of the more mainstream characters that they could really get some good length out of. They could say, let's put this guy into more. You had him being drawn into sort of the Infinity Stone sort of storyline as well. And you can Google that as well to figure out what happened there because he was having run-ins with the Silver Surfer. He was run-ins with Adam Warlock. Like, this guy was really playing with major characters. So then you've got this series where suddenly Rune pops up and he's in the Hyborian Age. Well, that's kind of weird. Let's talk about that for a minute. When you've got Rune as he's drawn into the Marvel Universe, and you could argue it was part of that whole Black September thing, but Godwheel really started off that mess. When he was drawn in, he was really drawn into the present time. But one of the things that Marvel is very good at doing is they're taking these characters and trying to apply them where they can. You got to recognize that Marvel was already dealing with extra-dimensional things and jumping around in time. They already had a vehicle for that. And Rune was supposed to be this elder god type person that was alive for all of this time, that was out there just destroying humanity. Like he literally wipes out entire species when he's given the chance. There's a reason why he refers to himself as the Dark God. He really is that, and it is a bad thing. So you now have him popping up in the Hyborian Age. Now what's interesting is there's zero explanation as to how he is in the Hyborian Age altogether. And it's interesting because I was actually on a couple forums where people were hypothesizing about this. They're saying, well, maybe when he was brought into the Marvel Universe, he was brought in originally in the Hyborian Age, and then all of the time afterwards was just him continuing to exist in the this Earth from the Hyborian Age all the way up to the present. Now, I'm not here to speculate as to whether that's real or not, whether that's true or not. Kind of an interesting take on things, but when we get to the end of the story, you'll kind of see why that probably isn't the case, because, well, there's a fair level of finality here. We'll just leave it at that. So that really gives you a sense of Rune. He's almost like this Dracula-like character that also has the ability to be a sorcerer and wield massive spells. He's physically this super strong killing machine, and there is a reason why you would call him the Dark God. With that sort of background of who this character is, let's start to dive into the story here as we have it. Okay, now let's get into the story itself. We know who Rune is, well, at least as much as we can know who Rune is. I wish I could give you more details as to who he is, but really, the character has never had a chance to be fleshed out truly the way he should be. Moot point. We have the high level points here. So this one starts off with Conan, just Conan, not Conan the Barbarian. That series had already ended. This is now the new Conan series in issue number 4. Now I'll put up the cover for that over here. Now, you have a pretty clear sense based on this cover. You can look at this and you can say, okay, well, Conan clearly is not going to be having a good time with Rune here. This is the start of something. And you also need to bear in mind that this sort of interrupts the story that was already continuing in Conan number 1, 2, and 3. And you see that when you get into the book. The very first thing that happens here is there's no Rune at all. In fact, what happens is the continuation of the actual story I just mentioned from Conan number 1, 2, and 3, taking up the majority of this book, where Conan is running into a city. He's just decimating people. He's doing full-on Chuck Dixon level, I'm going to kill everything in sight, which he really does. And ends up at the end of the day killing a sorcerer. He's releasing tigers on the town. He's doing everything that you would picture a Chuck Dixon Conan doing. And that's really a good story, actually. It's quite funny. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But the last couple pages suddenly kick off with this weird twist where suddenly we have Rune thrown in. And it's almost like this has just been shoved in the book because suddenly we needed to raise awareness for who Rune was and why this character's here. Let me show you this last page this thing enters into. It's over here. Now, this is where things for me start to make me raise an eyebrow. All right? One of the things that you'll notice, if you want to pause the video and zoom in up there, feel free. You'll notice right up at the top, it talks about in many-towered Turan. And it refers to this place that Rune's in as being a temple in the Street of Gods that's deserted because the only person there is him. Doesn't have any worshippers because he's eaten them all. But it really does give you a sense, or at least I get the sense when I read this, that Turan is a city. Turan is not a city in the Hyborian Age. And you know what? Let's stop here. Let's just jump over the map, shall we? Geography check. Okay, so Turan. Well, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here, but when somebody says to me, many-towered Turan, that seems to me like you're talking about a city. Now, this blue blob in the middle here, let's just take a moment and look at this. Turan, this thing here, Turan. Well, that doesn't look like a city to me. That's a country. Now, here's where I'm going to throw out the caveat here. You can't just attack everything. You got to just say, well, maybe there's a gimme on this one. Well, I think the gimme might be this. I do think this. When you have a sense of this city and you have a sense of what's being described, it's really describing somewhere that's major, that's got a road of gods. Now, I would argue they may be talking about Agripur down here. Now, for those of you who are out there playing the Conan role-playing game or that Exiles thing, maybe there's an actual city of Turan. I just can't find it. I can't find any reference to it. If you do know there's a city of Turan, tickety down below. Let's get back to the story. And we're back. Okay, so Turan is not a city. It's a country. So where this is specifically, we don't know. It's kind of interesting that I think Marvel is doing this intentionally so that they can later on perhaps retcon this back out. That never really happened because, it really wasn't in a city and it was, who knows? We'll talk about that later on. But Rune is in this temple and all he's doing is he's basically babbling about how humanity are sheep and he's just going to wipe them out. And he's going to consume all of them while he's continuing to gather power in his soul gems. The soul gems being the things, they're constantly his fixation. They're like his drug, really. He hates them and he loves them at the same time, which is kind of a weird way to writing this, but it's what Barry Windsor Smith wrote when he was doing the character. Anyways, he's basically saying, what could possibly kill me here? And he asks some pool to give him the answer. And of course, at first the pool doesn't give him anything. And then it shows him Conan, a young Conan, a wandering Conan, a barbarian Conan. And Rune sort of melts off, like, this guy's nothing. He's got nothing on me. And that's basically it. That's it. That's all that happens here. Rune basically babbles about humanity, says it's not that important, and he's going to eat it. And then he says, what's going to kill me? Oh, this guy, whatever. It's not going to happen. And that's basically the end of that story. So you have this issue where really it's flagged on the cover. Let's look at that cover again, where it says face to face with Rune. He's not face to face with Rune. He never actually meets Rune. Well, that was kind of disappointing. Weird. Let's get into book 2. All right, on book 2. Now, this is the money book. This is what the actual money was on here. I gotta tell you, this thing is the poop. Okay, now if you're a Barry Windsor Smith fan like I am, this is gonna check every box you possibly need to have checked when you're reading a comic. This is the one shot of Conan versus Rune. And it's completely drawn and written by Barry Windsor Smith. And there's a nice frontispiece right in the inside of the cover. And we're going to talk about that later on in the video. But you have a very clear sense that this book has been created because you're looking at a 25th anniversary of Conan the Barbarian being in Marvel and of Barry Windsor Smith first touching it. And the fact that Barry Windsor Smith's been brought back, and because they wanted to do something special, they decided to have Barry Windsor Smith draw Conan facing off against one of Barry Windsor Smith's own creations, and hence Rune. Now, bear in mind, we already saw Rune, and we had a good sense in Conan number 4, which was the first part of this trilogy, which doesn't seem too much like a trilogy based on what I just read. That's already leading into, we're going to be running into Rune here. Kind of an interesting story. Well, let's take some time here and just go through this thing page by page. Well, not really page by page, but let's just go through the book, shall we? Let's take a look at the front cover. It's over here. This is a pretty cool cover, and this is where you really start to get a sense of, okay, I'm going to be seeing something epic in here because Barry Windsor Smith does some very detailed work, and you're already seeing it on the cover. The story here basically talks about how Rune has ended up in the Hyborian Age, but it does it in a very cursory manner. And I'm going to show you a couple pages over here on this side as we're talking here, and you'll see that Rune was basically cast down to the earth. He's clearly had some sort of a fight, a battle. They talk a little bit about it in the book. I'm not going to go through it word for word. He's had a battle where clearly he's lost. He found himself in the desert wearing his black armor, which they mention has been torn like its rags, which means things did not go well. And they very clearly have a sense he did not win whatever battle he had. And basically these people who are desert dwellers in Turan, you're very clearly in Turan, and you have a sense that he's also in Western Turan. Not Eastern Turan, Western Turan, because you're nowhere near the Sea of Fayette. You have a sense that they were working on bringing him back to health, and they did. And they did a very good job bringing him back to health. And he learned their language very quickly. He spent the time learning about them, and he was very kind and had philosophical discussions with them about things where they recognized this guy isn't a prophet. He's legitimately a god. And they got to the point where they were worshiping him. And then things turned Rune. Things went very, very bad. Because when he was fully back at health and he's standing there talking to them, one of his main caregivers goes to give him a kiss on the cheek and he bites her head off and throws her corpse into the rest of the crowd. And then promptly decides to beat everybody else to death and starts eating them. He literally eats this entire city full of people. That's the backstory. Guy crashes into the Hyborian Age, gets nursed back to health by some people, and then eats them. There's a phrase here, and I'm going to make sure that image stays over here for a minute, where he screams, "Let the carnage begin." This is Rune. This is the Dark Horseman. This is the dark god that is Rune. This is what Barry Windsor Smith wrote. This is him doing him. That's dark. Like, he literally kills them all. Enter Conan. Conan comes wandering in, riding his horse, not wandering, well, meandering, because he's riding a horse, meanders into this. I love how these little nuances come up in the English language. He's meandering in here on his horse because he's saying to himself, I'm kind of hungry. Maybe these people will share some food. Gets there and discovers that actually, these aren't actually people in the desert that have food. They have a village down here. Oh, look, there's a soul gem. He doesn't recognize it as a soul gem. There's a soul gem over there. I'll go wander down there and see if I can get it. Even though I was thinking about just leaving because this place is so creepy dark, I'm going to go grab that. And he's trapped. Rune traps him in these catacombs within this city where Rune has also just eaten all these people. So there's bodies and pieces of people all over the place. Conan hears his horse being just ripped apart alive outside and being consumed. And he says, oh, I got to get further into these catacombs to get away from that mess. And he does. He heads further in and finds a survivor who tells him what's happened. And he says, you know, can you do me a favor and kill me? I need you to go to the rest of humanity and tell them that this guy is now on the earth because we're all going to get killed. Because this guy's unstoppable. And Conan's like, yeah, I should probably go do that. I'm going to get out of here. And he asks the guy how to get out and kills him out of mercy and leaves. Well, when he's leaving, he runs into a courtyard. When he's in the courtyard, he sees that there's a pile of decomposing corpses in the middle. And in that, Rune has built a chair, a throne out of human bones and flesh. And Conan, at this point in time, who was thinking to himself, I should probably just leave, his barbarian rage kicks in. And he takes out his sword and he just starts beating the crap out of this thing and calling out this beast, this monster. And there is an epic battle. I'm not going to go into the battle here. It is epic. If you like Barry Windsor Smith, you definitely want to get this book just to read that and go through the battle because it is so well done. Within it, the bottom line is Conan ends up beating the living crap out of Rune. Rune is literally beaten to death with Conan's bare hands after, of course, he stabs him in the neck and says, this is for my horse, which is kind of, I actually thought that was kind of a funny line. Anyway, he stabs him in the neck and then beats the living tar out of him to the point where he's a pulp. And Conan thinks, okay, well, this is now done. I can now leave. I've done my job. And you know what? I've made that poor Bedouin guy feel better because, you know, well, at least his soul is feeling better because, you know, he's not that different. He's rationalizing this to himself in his head. And he sees that suddenly Rune is basically being rebuilt. And the soul gems are searing. Rain is dropping at this point in time. And every time rain drops the soul and touches the soul gems, it sears off. And Conan says, no, you will not be reborn monster. And he grabs these soul gems. That's the mistake. And at that point in time, you have a massive panel. Over here. Conan starts to have horrendous visions of Rune and where he's from and what he's done. And insects devouring planets, which the insects, by the way, are representative of Rune, just in a different physical form. Conan finds himself being completely overrun with insects. Like, it's not going well. He's screaming because he can't fight this. This is a horrible nightmare, but it's beautifully depicted by Barry Windsor Smith. And then Conan wakes up and he's lying in the corpses. Rune is gone, completely gone. The throne and everything is all gone. The corpses are still everywhere. And Rune, in his sadistic, sick, and twisted way of thinking, has taken Conan's horse, taken its head, impaled it on Conan's own sword, which he has mounted in a pile of bones, and written some runic message to Conan on the wall that Conan cannot understand. Which, by the way, if you look at the frontispiece of this book, actually does tell you what it says. You gotta look for it, though. It's fairly obvious, but you gotta look for it. Anyways. And he's left this flaming horse head here, almost in mockery of Conan. Even though Conan has beaten him to death, Conan has actually won this. While he was having this horrendous vision, you can only imagine that Rune was getting up and walking around and having a good time and saying, hey, I better set this horse head on fire. Like, this is really Conan being at Rune's mercy. And for some reason, Rune let him go and basically wrote him a warning, which was kind of cool. But you really do have a sense, okay, Conan won. If he just hadn't done that stupid soul gem thing. And that's it. That's the end of book 2. Beautifully drawn, beautifully rendered. Very short story. And this has happened in Conan's younger life. Kind of neat. And you would say to yourself, okay, well, that is just a one little vignette story. That's a one quick take, Tennessee Fats. How does this actually draw into the point where you were saying this is actually a larger story? Well, let's get into book 3. All right, book 3 on this one. Book 3 is not a standalone one-shot. And book 3 actually injects itself into and interrupts the story of Conan the Savage. Now, I already made a video where I reviewed the first 6 issues of Conan the Savage, and I'll put a link for that up over here for you guys if you want to click on that and check that out. That was actually a fun video. I actually really enjoyed reading those magazines, which I almost didn't expect to do. Anyways, back to this one. Book 4 is book 4. Well, sorry, book 3 is book 3, book 2. We're just going to say part 3 is book 4 of Conan the Savage, okay? Here's what the cover looks like over here. This is a beautifully rendered cover, and it clearly gives you a depiction of, well, I wouldn't say that's America's ass, but that clearly is Captain America's ass, drawn on Conan. Anyway, never mind that now. Anyway, so you've got Conan here with a blade on his hand battling Rune. Okay, so this tells me that Conan is going to be fighting Rune. So how does this continue the story? Well, kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. Story starts off with this one being, let's take a step back here for a second. Story starts off with King Conan. Many years have passed. In fact, 20 years have passed since Conan has had his first run-in with Rune, wherein he beat him to a pulp, touched the soul stones, had a bit of a bad experience, and then basically woke up and Rune was gone. Okay, so we'll call that a draw. I would still argue that's a Conan win. We'll call that a draw. Well, it's a tie. It's a tie. We both win. We both get to walk away. It's everybody's seen the new Roadhouse movie? Yeah, anyway, they both get to walk away. Bottom line is, it's now King Conan. Many years have passed. Now, this particular story is written by Chuck Dixon. All right. Now, you guys know Chuck Dixon Conan is one hell of a murdering Conan. He's out there just killing the crap out of things. I think I made the analogy before where Chuck Dixon Conan in my mind is the guy that says, okay, I got to kill 15 people to go from here to here. It's time to start slaying. And away he goes. They're just slashy. People are dropping like, the guy's a beast, the way Chuck Dixon writes them. Anyways, this is what we're looking at here. Chuck Dixon's story. Beautiful art. Okay, I'm not going to say the name because I'm going to decimate it again. If you really want to know, go back to that other video I mentioned where it was about Conan the Savage. Beautifully rendered art in this story. Conan is King Conan here, and he's been attacked by some spider cult. So really, we're in Aquilonia at this point in time. We're somewhere nearby Aquilonia. The spider cult has attacked him. He's killed off the assassins. Zenobia is fine, but he ain't taking no guff. He's like, no, I am going to go kill every single member of this spider cult, and we're going to wipe it off the face of the earth. And he does. He heads off with his guys and says, let's go kill them. He comes upon them in their fortress and says, okay, leave the horses here. Dude, you stand here and watch the horses. I'm going to go in there and kill everything. Well, that's the Conan side of this. But something else is happening in the meantime, because the story doesn't open up with Conan. The story starts off with this splash page. Rune has wandered from wherever he is and wherever he was, because this is 20 years later, has wandered into Aquilonia. He's wandered in here because he's heading towards where he senses power. And the power source that he's sensing is the very castle that Conan finds himself drawn to wipe out the spider cult. Interesting aspect of this is there's a bunch of different layers that come into this story. When Conan finds himself actually fighting the spider cult, he finds out that they are actually doing some sort of an elder god summoning thing. They sacrifice a guy who's perfectly willing to be sacrificed, by the way. You got to read the language. It's kind of really creepy, actually. Anyways, and this elder god comes. Elder god comes and he arrives just as Conan is there slaughtering all of these spider worshipping psychopaths. And at the end of the day, Conan is saying, well, it's time to go. I guess we got to go kill that thing too. And ergo, Rune jumps into the fight. Rune jumps in to attack this elder god. Now, this is where you really start to get a sense of exactly how powerful and dangerous Rune is. This is Lovecraftian level elder god that's been summoned. This thing is a earth decimating level monster. This is something that can kill everything. And Rune just jumps on it. Funny part is, this thing recognizes Rune. Rune recognizes this thing. In Rune's prior cross-dimensional monstrosity of life that he's had, he's slaughtered all of this thing's worshippers. He slaughtered all of their people. He slaughtered everything to do with this thing without killing this thing. This thing knows Rune. Rune knows this thing. That's pretty freaking horrifying. At that level, you start to get a sense of, holy crap. I'm sorry. A Barry Windsor Smith creation has got level like Lovecraftian elder god-like level powers. That's pretty darned impressive. And then you say to yourself, how the hell did Conan beat the tar out of him in book 2? Whoa. I'm jumping the point here. Bottom line is, Rune attacks. Rune attacks, and it looks like Rune is lost and been devoured by this elder god. Conan has got an axe out. He's been slaughtering all these spider guys, trying to get to this elder god thing. Rune appears to have been swallowed by this monstrosity. Monstrosity is just sitting there just saying, I am going to kill you, dude, you Conan, dude, you guy, you. And just as he's saying this, he suddenly starts screaming because he's being consumed from the inside. Rune somehow has consumed this elder god into himself. I would argue that this is probably him consuming it into the soul stones. Or the soul shards. I would argue that's probably what happened here. Or he cast some sort of a sorceress thing. I don't know. We don't know. But what we know is when this is all over, Conan is left hiding around a corner with an axe, looking into the room, and there's Rune facing away from him going, holy crap, I'm back to full power. Now, this full power combat is kind of important. When Rune was at his point where he slaughtered all of these people in book 2, I would argue at that point in time he's probably still weakened. He hadn't absorbed the kind of level of power that he was used to having when he would have been, I don't know, in outer space fighting elder gods, wearing a suit of black armor. He's just consumed an elder god. He's now back at full power. And just as he's ranting about this, Conan walks up behind him and cuts his head off. Because Conan knows, this guy's bad news bear. I remember him, I know him, we're all gonna die. And it's funny because when he actually told his men to leave, he said, listen, if I don't come back out, the earth is going to die. That was effectively his takeaway to his men, which was kind of funny. Anyways, Conan starts hacking, cuts him down to bits, and leaves him. And the funny part about this is, and this is where you kind of get a sense of maybe there's some longevity to perhaps the fact that Rune does survive this. While his head is on the floor, he says, tell me your name so I can scream it to the void. And Conan says, well, my name's Conan. And there will be a lot of other people there that'll know it. Congratulations. And Conan walks away. And at the very last panel, the head of Rune sitting on the floor, eyes open. Oh, creepy close. Just a creepy close. And it was really cool the way they did it. But I think that would be the piece that could potentially give weight or credence to the fact that perhaps Rune might not be killable. Maybe he did survive this mess, and that's how he did. Maybe he had to recover for 10,000 years, which then brought him into the modern Marvel era. Weird, right? Let's do some thoughts on this. All right, let's get into the what the heck happened here kind of question, because this is the big one that's sitting in the back of my head. What the heck happened, okay? The story being what it is, okay? We've already talked about the 3 parts of the story, and the story was rather interesting because you had really, let's ignore book 1. Book 2 and book 3 were 2 different points in Conan's life. One was a very young Conan that was out being the barbarian, doing his thing and just living his best life. And this other part of it was 20 years later with an older, mature Conan, really recognizing that if he didn't take this thing down then and there, that the world was going to end. And it's interesting to think that this was something that Conan was aware of and remembered his entire life. Bear in mind, Rune let him go at the end of book 2. He could have killed him while he was down, unconscious, having these, I don't know, psychedelic, horrifying visions, but he didn't. He let him go. Conan's left with a warning written in runes, and he knows it's a warning, and he knows it's basically saying, hey, I'm going to get you later. That's basically what Rune was saying here, and Conan was aware of this his entire life. Now, I don't know about you guys, but to me, psychologically, that would be abso-freaking-lutely horrifying, knowing that some elder god type monstrosity was out there. Now, bear in mind, Conan was able to beat this man to death with his bare hands, okay? Possibly not that much of an elder god in Conan's mind at this point in time, because he did beat him into submission and to death with his bare hands. So you'd say, okay, well, listen, I got this guy that's going to potentially come and try to kill me later, but it's okay, I could probably handle it. But psychologically, the knowledge that you constantly have to look over your shoulder for 20 years, that's fairly major. Story-wise, that's pretty cool. I do really enjoy that little twist to this story. Let's talk about what actually happened here, though, as far as production goes. I don't know what happened here. This was a really strange one. I don't understand why, well, I have a hypothesis, but I don't really understand why this spanned 3 different stories. I don't understand why this had to span 3 different titles. I don't understand why this had to span 3 different books. Let's take this piece by piece, okay? We've already seen the covers of all 3 of these. The first one was in Conan number 4. And the funny part about it was that only took up 4 pages at the end of the comic. And it really seemed to be just a throw-in. It was almost like an afterthought. And here's what I suspect happened. And here's why I suspect this happened. If you look at the frontispiece to Conan versus Rune, now that came out in November of 1995. And it talks about the fact that this is a 25-year anniversary of something. And it talks, and you can Google it yourself. The fact that Barry Windsor Smith was one of the first people that drew Conan for Marvel. Yes, that's true. And Barry Windsor Smith is awesome. And Barry Windsor Smith has come back because of this 25th anniversary. And that's why we're having Barry Windsor Smith actually have Conan fight off against the character that Barry Windsor Smith created, because it's just so apropos. And plus, they just amalgamated Malibu into Marvel. So, you know, the rights just happened to walk through the door at that point in time. So by all means, let's use this. That's kind of interesting. That's kind of cool, right? I get that. That kind of makes sense. So you have this whole story happening here. And it was in November of 1995 that this Conan versus Rune thing, which was donned by Barry Windsor Smith and had to be out there, was done. Well, at that point in time, you also had an ongoing series of Conan the Savage that was already in production. And that had a lot of stories in it. Roy Thomas wrote some stuff in that, which we talked about in that other video I already did, where we talked about that particular series. But you also had Chuck Dixon out there writing a particularly brutal version of Conan. That's the Conan that literally just says, I'm going to go murder everybody. I've already talked about this enough times. This is the killing Conan. This is the Conan you do not mess with. This is the Conan where literally if he's in an alley, you don't just walk into the side of the alley, you turn around and walk back out, leave town, go to the next country, go to the smallest city in that country, and then walk down that alley. That's the kind of person that this Conan is. You don't mess with this person. This is trouble. But that was already in production with Conan the Savage. We already had Conan versus Rune. That was already in production. That obviously was something that was in production for a while. You don't get an artist like and a writer like Barry Windsor Smith drawn in unless you've given him enough notice. So I think what happened here was that was already slated. That was going to happen. Then you had this Conan the Savage thing going on. Why not have it continue? Why not have a chapter within that? You've already got Chuck Dixon writing some really good Conan here. Why not continue something within that? Okay, so now we're going to have a two-parter here. Then they started to draw together ad material. And the ad material, and I'm going to put up a picture of it over here, the ad material clearly has Conan number 4 sitting at the bottom of this, whereas Conan becomes aware of this threat. It's the line that they have at the bottom there. Conan never becomes aware of this threat. It never happens. In book 1, Conan has no clue what's going on. He has no clue what Rune is until he actually runs into him in part 2. I think what happened was Marvel started off with an idea of this one shot. Then you had what we'll call organizational drift occur, wherein they said, let's make this a little bit larger. We've already drawn in Rune versus Conan. This is going to be epic. We're starting to see some preliminary material. Let's make it a 3-parter. Drew up the second part, drew up the third part, recognized the need to do the first part, and then I was like, oh, we're out of time. And that's where that 4-page insert at the end of book 1 came in. This is my theory. I could be entirely wrong, but you know, if I'm looking at all the signals, when I'm looking at the ad material, I'm looking at that frontispiece in the back of book number 2, and I'm looking at what was actually drawn up at the back of Conan number 4, it really is an afterthought. Which is too bad, because really you had a story here that developed the Conan character into something with an extra layer. You guys know I'm crazy about layers. I love it when they suddenly take a character and they're going to add extra layers to it or peel off layers within the character to explain something within them that makes them deeper, shows that character growth. I love that stuff. It always makes me happy. And when you're adding something to a character I already love, like Conan, that's fantastic. And when you're doing the same thing by adding potentially an extra layer to the Rune character, which I already think is super cool, and then has recently been brought into Marvel, again, you're adding, whoa, he was alive in the Hyborian Age. Did he survive that? And he's alive for 10,000 years on Earth, and that's, like it answers a bunch of questions and really checks a lot of boxes in the development of the Rune character. But unfortunately, we'll never really know what happened there because the Rune character didn't really get the space he needed at Marvel. Neither did any of the Malibu characters, by the way. If any of you ever actually want to see me do a video about Malibu and my thoughts on it, let me know and I'll do it as something completely separate from the Conan the Barbarian stuff. I gotta tell you, I still have at least the important Malibu issues downstairs in the Tennessee Fats collection. I still love those books. I still think they're fantastic, and I probably never forgive Marvel for the collapse of Malibu because I really do blame them. I do. And Disney, if you're watching this, I'm hoping you'll do something to fix all the rights and everything to bring those characters back. Maybe spin it off as a retro title or something, or a sub-production. Okay, we're off topic now. If you want to see it, let me know. But this was an interesting story, and I do think that Marvel kind of flubbed it in how they produced this one. Flubbed it in that way that this 3-parter became a 2-parter. I'm not saying the 2-parter is bad. The 2-parter was great. But I wonder what it would have been if there was a level 3. I guess we'll never know. All right, it's time for the wrap-up. Let's let this bad boy... Okay, so here's the Tennessee Fats wrap-up. Let's get to the most important question, which is something that I always put in these videos. Did I enjoy this? Well, I think if you watched my description, this whole thing all the way through, you're getting the tone. I really did appreciate this story. I don't think it was what it could have been. I think if given enough time and a little more resources, this could have been an actually really interesting mini-series and or a graphic novel or something that was produced at the time that could have really added to both Conan and to Rune. But I do think this was probably rushed. I think what probably happened here was it got to deadlines and unfortunately, we got to make her a two-parter. We're going to cut her short, and that was it, which is a shame. I did enjoy this story. I thought it really added, as I mentioned, a level to both the character of Conan and the character of Rune. I think both of them walked away from this. I think walking away is an overstatement. Both of them walked away from this with another level of who they are as a person, which really does add to the value of these characters overall. I enjoyed this. Honestly, I think as a Conanophile, this was a good story. As a Runophile, there you go, I just made that one up. As a Runophile, I also think this is an actual really good story. Now granted, Rune doesn't win in either case, but Rune's the dark god. You don't want to see him win. Very interesting character, but having him lose was kind of the right choice. Because what would happen if you had Conan lose? If Conan loses, he's dead. You don't want that. Nobody wants that. That is IP suicide. We're not touching that. But doing it this way, really well done. I enjoyed this. Do you need to own this as a Conanophile? That's a tough one. I got to tell you, the Conan the Savage Part 4 or Book 4, I think you should own that. I think that is actually a nice pivotal piece. Now, I've already talked to why you should already own that because of another video, and if you watch enough of my channel, you know why. I've already said you should own that, but it's a good one. I did enjoy that. If you're a real Barry Windsor Smith fan and you don't own this Conan versus Rune story, you are missing out on some major Barry Windsor Smith genius within this thing. This is just gold. You should own it for that reason. That being said, if you're a Conan purist and you don't want this sort of noise hanging around your character, there's a lot of noise that's going to be added by throwing this into your repertoire. Leave it alone. If you're willing to expand it a little, yeah, go find these, bring them home. Do you need that Conan issue number 4? No, you don't. You don't need that first part. It doesn't do anything to the story. It was the rushed add-in. Just let it go. Interesting one. I gotta tell you, when I read this like last month and I read all 3 of these, and I said to myself, this is a good one. I should discuss this. I should make sure people know this is out there. I kind of knew I would be leaning towards, yeah, I'm probably going to tell people to get this, but I also kind of knew, well, you know, there might be that aspect of the purists out there that really don't want to own this. This is kind of why my brain said, let's throw in that caveat. But this is a really good story. I'm sorry, but it is, and I do think you'll enjoy it. Fun one. Well, everybody, that's our video for today. I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next video.